I'd like to apologize for hanging you all up like that, but that troll just really had to go. And for those who are wondering what it is I did, especially those who skipped the last few videos, this is pretty much the end result.
That is how you would end it.
So now we continue and never look back. Last time on Sabrina Online, Zigzag brought Sabrina along for some trade show and was about to forcibly kiss her. What happens next? Well, obviously enough, she gets socked. I mean, who wouldn't? This was clearly sexual harassment, and it's always worse when it's your own boss. She does apologize for it, and Sabrina admits that she was intimidated enough from losing her first job that she didn't want to lose the second one. Yet Zigzag seems willing to help her self-esteem. And yeah, she's slowly turning into a likable character. Yes, she tends to get a little too close for comfort, yet surprisingly she seems more adult in personality than she makes it look like. For one thing, she offered to get Sabrina a separate room, and while she does end up sneaking into her bed later, which results in Sabrina dreaming of kissing Richard, Zigzag is perfectly fine with her having a boyfriend. If anything, it's just her habit of sleeping with everybody that can be a bother to some people. Oh, and for the record, she proclaims to be bisexual.
I'd hit it.
Now, since we're in the mid-2000s and there's still like 16 years worth of comics, I want to go over as much as I can while hoping to make this video about, say, 20 to 25 minutes long. I mean, that 12-minute video with a month-long break after should not be accompanied by another video that's shorter. So I'll go all the way, but at least get the very important storylines, since really, this is pretty much a sitcom in webcomic form. Anyway, after the trip, she returns home to set up a chat with Richard. Since their first meeting was so short-lived, they decide to go to a restaurant together and really get to know each other. They both seem nervous about it, which is even more reason why they are perfect for one another. What makes this conversation funny is given how they're both computer technicians, in a way, their conversation can lead to things that only those in the industry could understand. Like, he's a Microsoft, and she's an Amiga, yet they're willing to respect each other's preferences given their starting relationship. And aw, they finally kissed. Same thing, since they apparently only live like a half hour apart from each other, they decide to meet at her place. But oh man, that rabbit guy again. Well, it turns out he's that one guy who's had a crush on someone but was too afraid to admit it. Doesn't change the fact he's pretty much a stalker, but it looks like his character arc is coming. While Sabrina and Richard hang out at home, Amy and Thomas are out for karaoke. Guess she hasn't been able to get laid in a while, but it sounds like these two kids will. So, are you a virgin?
What? Shut up! What kind of question is that?
I was kinda expecting this to happen a bit later than this. I mean, they only ever met each other twice now. Man, this relationship is moving fast. At least he still has that one condom a friend gave him years ago. Insert broken condom joke here. They should really take lessons from Amy, as they apparently don't have quite the drive for it. And there it is. And half my audience just left due to seeing two animal characters making out, like they would. And just to reiterate that they are in fact doing it, her toys come to life as they want to thank her, only to discover them sexing it up. And then later, Amy and Thomas return, and really, this turned out good for the two, as unlike with Zigzag, this was not a dream. Of course, she gets teased for it since, after all, this was her first time actually doing it with someone. Even her boss is happy for her. She even asks for her to bring Richard along to her party, and he ends up replying that he'd be okay with it. Of course, there's the problem of needing a babysitter for Timothy and Tabitha because Mother has perfect timing. And the babysitter that ends up showing up first is Bunny Guy again, and he totally squanders it.
Loser! You're a loser!
Anyway, Bunny Man, despite the rocky start, learns a valuable lesson from Tabitha. Don't wanna wait forever. It makes you sad your whole life. Gotta let yourself be happy now. Truly, we can all learn something from this. And of course, Amy knew all along he was a poor sap with a crush. Oh well, at least we won't ever see him again. Okay, one other strip, but otherwise he does find someone else to love. As for the party, well, like Zigzag said, it's formal, so it's not like totally adult. So as Sabrina and Richard leave the party, after a really awkward moment during it, they end up going down a dark alley, which is always bad because muggers. Sabrina surprisingly insists she can handle things, but why? What would turning around possible? Oh wait, she's a skunk. You know what that means. She still has the stench. This leading back to Zigzag, and more reason why she is a good character. Despite the business she runs, she legitimately cares for her co-workers. Having had bad experiences herself, she tends to worry if anyone else got hurt. This makes her very relatable since people like her do tend to get hurt a lot, so it's cool to see someone familiar with this constantly making sure her friends are alright. This makes her more three-dimensional as she isn't just some sexualized character who can get in some fan service at times. It's very easy to make a character like her and not give her an actual identity. Unlike Cindy from Final Fantasy XV, Zigzag actually has depth to what she's like and what she provides for the main character. You actually have a reason to give a damn about her well-being and not just like her for looks. In this comic's case, she's even well balanced enough to where it doesn't always come off as blatant when you know it can happen anytime. Oh, and at any rate, she gives her a sex tape to watch. Just because. And guess who ends up watching it instead? You know, speaking of these two, we haven't really had any real development with them in a long while. Most of their stuff is just side events during Sabrina development, and it feels like they're being neglected. April 2002 has them interacting with Timothy, which is adorable, I must admit, but even then it doesn't lead to much. Thomas has problems with changing diapers, and yeah, it's funny, but where's the character development? I feel like they're going to eventually end up like Rachel from Family Matters, introduced to be main characters, only to be pushed aside for the Laura and Steve of the series. Of course, I'm not saying Richard is like Steve Urkel in personality, even though he and Sabrina are nerds, but I mean that instead of putting focus on everybody, we just keep it to the one pairing that gets the most attention, while occasionally throwing the others a bone. Well, Timothy gets more to do than his parents, as he gets dumped on Sabrina while she has to go to work. She's forced to take Tabitha too, so, of course, Zigzag has to make her place a kid-friendly environment. Most of the funny stuff that happens in this comic almost always happens when Sabrina is around. And yes, I know what the title of this comic is called, but still, give these characters some time to develop too. Right now, Sabrina has to put up with her parents, who, after seeing Tabitha acting like a movie star, they want to know more about what she's been doing, and so far, the dad is reasonable enough to talk with her. Of course, he's still a man, which means he lets the fact Sabrina's dating a raccoon slip. You know, considering you always dump your daughter on her, you probably shouldn't have any say on who she dates. You're too controlling as it is. Sabrina and her mother talk for a while Richard chats with her father, and it goes about as well as you'd hope. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw them more, especially when Mother is very old-fashioned, despite herself going against old-fashioned traditions when she was young. And then, as everyone goes to leave, Sabrina's car breaks down, so with Zigzag, she's convinced to go get a new one. I think by now we're in a slow period, so why don't we find something worth talking about? Like 2005, and it seems like the new leader of the Transformers toys are planning to go after Timothy. Actually, the reason I bring this up is because if this series started in 1996, and the time he was born was in the 2000s, then year-wise it should be about 1997 to 98, depending on how long it took for him to actually be conceived. Now, it isn't like the year-end Christmas panels are canon to where they show a year passing, but then, if this strip is saying it's the year 2005, why is everyone still roughly the same age?
Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
Aw, poor Grimlock. This will probably be the most embarrassing thing he's done until Transformers 4. Anyway, Sabrina ends up taking her father and Richard to where she works, and well, seeing this one fox reminds father that he's an old man. Guess what that means later. Anyway, her computer seems to break, so she sends it in for repairs. This might be funny to you, but I'm sure everyone has had this problem before where you have to send away your precious expensive electronic box and they act like it never arrived. I almost had it happen with my Wii U when it acted up. Twice. But both times at least it didn't end up like Sabrina. Now it's 2006 and Timothy is now old enough to talk in references. Yeah, time to stop watching Family Guy before he decides to kill Amy. This year seems to mostly be a Sabrina and Zigzag one, as she decides to want to take her out for shopping and crap, just to get to know each other. It naturally leads to some drinking, and when this guy starts hitting on them, Zigzag steps in. Should I start with your do you want me to with a he needs an adult? Later on, Sabrina finds out from her father that her mother found Zigzag's business card, which means another dinner session. Oh, and we have couple side strips involving Carly and Spike, who I haven't seen since the convention? Yeah, I figured they'd be main characters too, but like Amy and Thomas, they seem to have been relegated to minors who may appear sometimes for a random gag. Now this has become Family Matters. Not that it's a bad thing, but I'm just feeling bummed out for thinking everyone we met would have plenty of screen time. At least the development we get means something. Like, apparently the reason Zigzag has the fur pattern she has is because her grandfather was a Siberian tiger. That makes sense. And the dinner itself goes well. She didn't reveal the fact she makes sex videos, but her mother is still suspicious. This gets Zigzag to want to make public service videos otherwise, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I think even this might be considered a slow period, so why don't we find something else to talk about? Oh, hello! Would-be current movies. Transformers, Spider-Man 3, Pirates of the Caribbean 3? Yeah, those came out in 2007, but again, hardly anyone age given the fact that Timmy is like 3. Or at least he is. How are these movies that are too modern for the 90s making it into this universe? What is this, Simpsons logic? Jumping into 2009, Tabitha got a computer and she discovered Zigzag's website. Oh, internet, how could you allow such a thing? Fell right into that one. And also Zigzag has an eye hemorrhage. Cool. Anything else? Mommy, how big are your boobies?
A booby trap that actually catches boobies.
This is relevant given all the Transformers strips they have. Seriously, there's a lot of them, and I can never figure out the point to them. Oh hey, Amy and Thomas might get to do something to develop character. I mean, they leave Timothy with Sabrina. Surely that'll let us see more of them or have conflict?
Come on, please help me talk today. I need your love, I feel so safe. I need a kick and you're so big. Oh, doctor, please.
No. No, it doesn't. They just get to relive their sex days. You think so? Yeah. The problem with reviewing this comic is there's far too many slow periods and it looks like everything I could talk about has pretty much been done. Let me put it like this. This is a slice of life comic that mostly goes over Sabrina while occasionally bringing in other characters and giving them some time to develop. But much like Family Matters, it slowly reaches a point where only a few select named characters end up mattering and characters who you thought were important just become filler. That's not to say they don't produce plenty of humorous content when they do show up, it's just a little disappointment that what looked to be a pretty diverse comic ends up only downsizing over time. Second, the time-lapsing in this series is very strange. Like The Simpsons, it feels like the aging for these characters is either frozen or super slow, while the technology comes in faster to where it feels the need to reference the common everyday occurrences at the time. And while that seems to speed up, character development seems to slow down to a snail's pace, and it just doesn't have as much relevance as earlier strips. Really, it was around the 2010s that I felt like there wasn't much else to talk about that wasn't just repeating the first video or even this one. Unlike that last set of videos where I had so much to talk about besides the play-by-play analysis. It might be a good thing then, since aside from some of the sex scenes, including when Zigzag discovers how webcams work, there hasn't really been any event that I can really talk about in depth on why, whether or not it works. It's just more reason why you might want to look at them yourself in your own time. But for review purposes, I feel like it's time to wrap up. Well, okay, one really interesting thing that happens during 2012 is she gets attacked by that same mugger who jumped her and Richard before. He ends up attacking her, and if you were reading this on a bi-weekly basis, you'd probably be super worried she might have died. She doesn't, but the damage was definitely severe. If anything, it's strips like this that remind you that you do in fact still care for these characters, even after all these years. This leads to everyone kicking the crap out of the guy, even though Zigzag does most of the work. Still, this leads to Richard deciding he'd like to take their relationship to the next level by having her move in with him. She accepts, and this is of course bad for Amy because now they'll have one less person to share rent with. This means Thomas has to actually get a real job. And I thought, finally, character development! I mean, it took them 13 years to finally start having some kind of dilemma after giving birth. I don't know if the wait was totally worth it, but the idea that Thomas has to start working for a drugstore is hilarious. All the while, Sabrina and Richard go apartment shopping and eventually find one after much effort. Oh, and because Zigzag got arrested for assaulting that mugger, she ends up needing to take anger management courses. Surprisingly, the job search plot goes on longer than a year, as even Amy is looking for a job. She ends up working at a bar late at night, and it definitely affects her usual night habits. She even gets to meet Spike after how many years? Well, it's 2015 now, so 5 years, maybe? Oh, and Zigzag is getting therapy. This leads to backstory on how she got bullied and how her father became abusive. This explains a lot actually, even where she met one of her recurring friends. It's honestly sad to see her having gone through with this, even though it took so long to get to this point. As we approach 2016, we see Richard proposing to Sabrina, which makes you think she might not accept, but it warps to further in the future where they're married and have a child? Huh? Zigzag is now manager of a media company, but yeah, at this point it seems like Eric is wrapping up the story and giving everyone some resolutions and whatnot. At least that's what I thought. Then I realized this was just in her head. She does accept though, so yay, marriage! Oh, and Carly got pregnant and is already at a certain point in her pregnancy. Why was she and Spike included on the TV tropes page again? Sabrina brings this up with her parents, and of course, Mother doesn't approve, even after Sabrina talks about Zootopia. I'll get to it eventually. She seems to allow it, but only after realizing, wait a minute, I did what she was doing when I was younger. Everyone starts getting wedding invites. They get set up for it, and well, it goes off very well. No real nonsense to speak of. For a comic on the way to the end, it goes off as well as you'd hope. Mother is slowly accepting her daughter is growing up, and Zigzag has gone through enough therapy that she knows to respect Sabrina's boundaries, especially now that she's married. Thus, it ends with her and Richard in bed, having another session, with one last callback to that one time when Thomas banged Amy. Well, despite how sloppy I handled this review, I just want to say, I really like this comic. As far as slice of life comics go, it's pretty nice to see how they handled real life situations in an otherwise fictional Earth, even with the weird time lapsing they had. While I'm still disappointed by the lack of focus on more than just 3 characters, the comic manages to maintain a good sense of humor and still provide moments of character development steadily through the years. The art even managing to show a steady increase in quality over time, while still capturing the uniqueness it carries. I could see now why some reviewers enjoy certain characters, as many are likable and never come off as too annoying or anything bad. Sabrina in particular is probably one of the best geek characters I've ever read about, and whose life goes through the notions quite well that you can relate to her. That's the thing with this comic. There's a lot to relate to. They might be animals, but they are still pretty much like real people in nearly real situations. That's the biggest strength of the comic, and I imagine it's why people come back to it even when nothing major happens. It's just a really good webcomic overall, and while it's pretty much done, there is implication that more will come in some shape or form. So who knows? Even then, this is a good example of how hard work and dedication will lead to some great payoffs, even in the world of webcomics. So again, I like to apologize for splitting this special up the way I did. Life comes at me, and sometimes I just don't know how to handle it. But now we're like 200 subs closer to 3K. I just want to come out and say that I should really make these subscriber specials more sparse from each other and not like every 500, you know? They don't feel as special if they come out that often. So I think the feature ones will be at marks I feel would be special. Like the next one should be like 5,000 perhaps? At the same time though, I would still like to give people some opportunity to vote on what I could maybe do. So, what do you think? Should I make it so that any patron can vote on a set of videos I offer up? Or do you not mind if you wait for the opportunity whenever I feel like the time is right? Let me know in the comments. Either way, next month it's the Patreon board as usual, and one more video to really end the pre-season 5 activities. Until then, I'm the Media Hunter.
Gee.